This is AMTV. Hello there everyone, and welcome to part 16 of this series looking at the history and impact of Doctor Who viewing figures. If you're joining us for the first time, a very warm welcome to you. We hope you stick around for future instalments and check out our previous episodes. We've covered the first 3 Doctor's eras and now the first 4 years of the 4th Doctor. But for now, sit back, relax, and join me once again as we delve back into the wonderfully niche world of Doctor Who viewing figures. Our destination? Season 16. By the summer of 1978, Doctor Who was gearing up for the start of its 16th season. But more than ever, the programme would have to face up to increasingly difficult challenges. Season 15 had battled against strong competition from ITV and the arrival of Star Wars to UK cinemas, which set brand new heights for science fiction and what could be achieved in terms of special effects. This resulted in Season 15 becoming the first Tom Baker season to average at under 10 million viewers. So for its next run of stories, something had to change. But with budgets being squeezed even further, instead of amping up special effects, Doctor Who had to find another way to get audiences back to BBC One at Saturday tea time. The result was the decision that Season 16 would be made up of the usual 6 stories, but all of which would have one overarching story that ran through the entire series. This would be the first real time that Doctor Who attempted one consistent story arc, and that arc would be the quest for the key to time. A 6-piece structure that would give the wielder all the powers of time, and it's up to the Doctor, aided by K9 and new assistant Romana, to track down the individual segments, in order to stop the universe's descent into chaos. An interesting concept for sure, but could producer Graham Williams and script editor Anthony Reed pull it off? And for Tom Baker, now in his 5th year in the role, could he continue to bring the magic and wonder of his entirely alien incarnation? Well, let's dive right in and find out. The first story from Season 16 is the Ribos Operation. The Doctor is summoned by the White Guardian and tasked with finding the 6 segments of the key to time. Together with his new Time Lady companion, Romana, the Doctor travels to the feudal world of Ribos in pursuit of the first segment. This story is comprised of 4 episodes, which began airing on the 2nd of September 1978 and concluded on the 23rd of the same month. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 4 episodes, and these numbers are pretty solid in terms of getting things started. All but one part crosses over the 8 million mark, and the one that doesn't, part 3, only just misses out. The peak comes with the opening episode, which had 8.3 million households tuning in. But what about the top 40 TV programmes? Did Doctor Who rechart comfortably as it had been doing for many years at this point? The answer here is just about. Part 1 just misses out, placing 42nd, but the remaining 3 parts just scrape in towards the lower end of the chart. Parts 2 and 4 placing the highest at 36th place. So, with the key to time quest beginning here, what factors helped or hindered Doctor Who in gaining these respectable numbers? I think we'll start with one of the main staple factors that we look at, which is competition. After dominating a lot of the previous season with American import, Man from Atlantis, did ITV manage to muster the same strong competition? Throughout the Ribos Operation's run, numerous programmes on the other side faced against it depending on the region that you lived in. These included former foes such as espionage show The Master Spy, action series The $6 Million Man, and nostalgia-filled show Happy Days. However, there were new challenges to Doctor Who also, including the life and times of Grizzly Adams, but perhaps more notably, The Bionic Woman. This sci-fi show had been an instant smash hit, its opening episode having attracted around 14 million viewers back in 1976, and this initial impact had waned by 1978, but its presence undoubtedly would have had some audience members hotly debating which channel to tune into. So if the competition from ITV was strong, what was going on in the promotional department? The return of Doctor Who was lavishly highlighted in the Radio Times, not with a front cover, but with a colour feature looking at the many female companions throughout the show's history, with particular emphasis on Mary Tamm, who was joining the cast as Time Lady Romana. Mary also appeared in numerous publications, giving interviews in which her arrival aboard the TARDIS was discussed. Going alongside this strong run of print promotion, the Ribos Operation also received a special trailer that aired on BBC One immediately after the summer repeat of the Season 15 story, The Sunmakers. This also acted as a de facto trailer for Season 16 as a whole, although only clips from the opening 2 stories were shown. All of this was to help audiences gear up for the show's return for another run of adventures, and it's arguably better than what was offered last season in a promotional regard. As a season opener, the Ribos Operation does a great job of establishing this season's story arc and offering a solid adventure to kick things off. The script by legendary writer and former script editor Robert Holmes is brimming with his trademark witty dialogue and memorable characters. The introduction of the White Guardian and the Key to Time concept feels epic and intriguing, and Romana's entrance and first few scenes with the Doctor is some of my favourite companion introduction moments of all time. Some fans argue that the opening instalment of the Key to Time saga is indeed the best, and for me personally, I would agree. But of course, be sure to check it out for yourself. I think you'll be hard pressed to deny that this is an exciting start to a much grander adventure. Overall, this story attracted an average of 8.1 million viewers, which is a 0.3 drop from the previous season opener, Horror of Fang Rock. This number remains fairly consistent with how the last 3 season openers performed, all of which averaged out at under 10 million viewers. However, saying that, I would maintain that an 8 million viewer average, whilst not being phenomenal, is still fairly decent, and somewhat impressive for a show which at this point is approaching its 15th birthday. Even though Doctor Who was fast approaching this milestone, the Ribos Operation, if anything, shows that there is so much life left in the old dog yet. The perfect story to kick off the Key to Time season, and certainly one of Robert Holmes' finest in my opinion. And if you want to embark on the quest for the Key to Time yourself, you can read the Target book from 1979, or its audio adaptation from 2011. To watch it, you have the VHS release from 1995, or the DVD release from 2007 as part of the Key to Time box set. Season 16 begins by showing audiences that Doctor Who was willing to try new things with its format, while still maintaining the familiar sense of adventure and fun in its storytelling. The Ribos Operation may be an early peak for this season to some viewers, but despite all its positives, we still have 5 more segments of the Key to Time to track down. So let's see where this quest will take us next.
I'll call you Romana.
I don't like Romana.
It's either Romana or Fred.
All right, call me Fred.
Good. Come on, Romana.
The second story from Season 16 is the Pirate Planet. The TARDIS heads to Califrax to locate the second segment of the Key to Time. However, the Doctor and Romana are surprised to find themselves on the planet Zanuck, ruled by the tyrannical captain. But who is the real power behind the captain? And where is Califrax? This story is comprised of 4 episodes, which began airing on the 30th of September 1978 and concluded on the 21st of October. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 4 episodes, and despite some small increases, numbers seem to have remained largely unchanged from the previous story. Part 1 crosses over 9 million viewers, the first episode of the season to do so, and most of the remaining episodes hover within the 8 million range except for Part 2, which records the story's lowest point with 7.4 million tuning in. In terms of the top 40 programmes, only Part 1 was able to lodge itself a place within the chart, that place in question being 30th. Parts 2, 3 and 4 all sadly miss out, Part 2 being the furthest behind, charting 52nd. So despite missing out mostly on the top 40, audiences seem to remain pretty loyal to Doctor Who. So what did the Pirate Planet offer to them to keep them watching? Well, promotion for this story was a bit more low-key compared to what was seen for the Ribos Operation. The Radio Times only had a monochrome photo to offer for Part 4's broadcast, and there wasn't a trailer that followed after the conclusion of the previous story. There was a short trailer before the broadcast of Part 4, however, and the inclusion of the guest stars, such as Bruce Purchase as the pirate captain, was highlighted in various publications. However, around this time, an interview with Tom Baker himself proved to be quite controversial. Entitled A Life in the Day of Tom Baker, this interview had the star discuss his day-to-day life, including rehearsing Doctor Who, going to his evening haunts for a drink, and, rather alarmingly, entering a strange room in Soho in which he claimed he considered suicide. Also discussed was his living arrangements, for he was living with designer Marianne Ford and her daughter at the time. However, after giving this interview, he feared this would upset her. If anything, this showed Tom at his most candid, and in hindsight, he sees this interview as an indicator as to how unreasonable he was starting to become. And this issue is something that we will turn to again in later seasons. On the competition side of things, ITV again was changing up its offerings for different regions. Facing off against the Pirate Planet was some of the same shows as before, but also some newcomers, including Doctor on the Go, How the West Was Won, and The Incredible Hulk. Many of these programmes proved popular with viewers, which arguably helped prevent Doctor Who from reaching heights of 10 million or more at this time. It's a shame in a way, because the Pirate Planet is a lot of fun to dive into. The script was written by Douglas Adams. Yes, that Douglas Adams. Prior to his explosive success with The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Adams was a jobbing writer, and The Pirate Planet would prove to be his first engagement with Doctor Who. If you're a fan of his work, you'll notice his style laced all over this story. From the dialogue, the way certain characters are written and performed, and his certain brand of humour that is instantly recognisable to a long-time consumer of his projects. Bruce Purchas especially, who plays the pirate captain, I believe walks a perfect line of being both menacing and threatening, but also hilarious and almost pantomime when needed. It's a marked change from the darker frivolities of the Ribos Operation, but a welcomed one nonetheless. Arguably one of the most fun installments of the Key to Time saga, and one I'm sure you're bound to get a chuckle out of somewhere down the line. Overall, this story attracted an average of 8.3 million viewers, a 0.2 increase from the previous story. It's reassuring to see the averages are increasing, rather than head on a downward trajectory like the first half of Season 15 did. But I do think it's a shame that despite all of the effort placed into promoting the show's return, the emphasis on Romana joining and the overall Key to Time story, that viewers were still being kept away, either by strong competition from ITV, or from the fact that after Star Wars arrived, many began to view shows like Doctor Who as being tired and cheap. We also have some repeat data for you. Continuing the tradition of summer repeats leading into a new season, The Pirate Planet was one of 2 stories chosen to be re-aired, to help promote the upcoming Season 17. Airing over 4 consecutive Thursdays from the 12th of July to the 2nd of August 1979, here are the viewing figures for this repeat, which average out at 3.5 million viewers. This is obviously a much lower average than on their original broadcast, but like the summer repeats before it, there are some standout reasons for this. One being that the summer season was in full swing, the hot weather and lighter evenings keeping people out and about rather than cooped up indoors watching television. Furthermore, the repeats were placed against a new sci-fi series on ITV, Sapphire and Steel, whose opening episode drew in nearly 12 million viewers. And when accounting for all of this, a Doctor Who repeat didn't stand that much of a chance. Despite some audience members turning away from Doctor Who for more glossy offerings in both the cinema and over on ITV, if you watch The Pirate Planet, I would argue that those people definitely missed out on a fun story. To get in on the fun for yourself, you can read the BBC Books novelisation from 2017, the Target novelisation from 2021, or listen to the soundtrack via a 2012 audio release. To watch it, you have the VHS release from 1995, or the DVD release from 2007 as part of the Key to Time box set. The Pirate Planet may have its flaws, but I was genuinely surprised at how much fun I had with it upon a rewatch. If you're a Douglas Adams fan, then it's one you should definitely check out, and keep in mind, this won't be the last time we see Adams' name pop up. But with the villains defeated, another segment of the Key to Time is acquired. 2 down, 4 to go. So where will we find the third piece?
By the great pallet of Hades, you shall pay with the last drop of your blood, every corpuscle. Do you hear?
The third story from Season 16 is The Stones of Blood. The hunt for the third segment of the Key to Time leads to modern-day Earth and an ancient stone circle. There, an ancient goddess, the Kaliak, is worshipped by druids. But who is the Kaliak really? This story is comprised of 4 episodes, which began airing on the 28th of October 1978 and concluded on the 18th of November. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 4 episodes, and again, to some extent, these numbers remain consistent, but they're also much more sporadic than the previous 2 stories. The peak comes with Part 3, which crosses the 9 million barrier once again, finishing with 9.3 million tuning in. The lowest point came the week before, with Part 2, which had nearly a third less watching, having 6.6 million households switched on. For the top 40 programmes, only Parts 1 and 3 were able to gain a place within the chart, but both falling at the same place near the bottom of the listings at 38th place. So with viewing figures appearing to jump up and down a bit more wildly, was there a direct cause as to why this was happening? Well, promotion-wise, The Stones of Blood presented a massive opportunity, as it was in fact the 100th Doctor Who adventure to go out on TV. It also aired close to the programme's 15th anniversary, so a double whammy of celebration should have been a ripe opportunity for the BBC to promote the show like never before. However, rather surprisingly, this didn't happen. The 100th story achievement was only mentioned by the continuity announcer immediately before Part 1 began, so you can't help but feel there was a major missed chance to capitalise on the milestone.
Here on BBC One, the start of the 100th adventure for Doctor Who. Tom Baker stars in The Stones of Blood.
There was very little promotion for The Stones of Blood itself, but various Doctor Who alumni were popping up in different ways. Tom Baker made a visit to schools in Belfast, at the height of the Troubles in Ireland, which was covered in local news programmes and publications. Mary Tamm visited a school in Edinburgh to help promote safety around fireworks, and former Doctor Jon Pertwee made an appearance on Nationwide to promote his new book, The Jon Pertwee Book of Monsters, where he was also joined by a Dalek, played by operator John Scott Martyn. All of these separate appearances could have helped raise the profile of Doctor Who amongst the everyday viewer, but again, it's a travesty that the 100th Doctor Who story to air didn't receive any specialist promotion. Meanwhile, on the other side, at ITV, competition remained mostly the same as what went up against The Pirate Planet. However, Part 4 would go out against Bruce Forsyth's Big Night, a variety show that had proved somewhat of a disaster for the ITV network. Initially planned to win the ratings war with the BBC by pinching Brucey away from them, this didn't go to plan, but the recent move to an earlier time slot, one that competed with Doctor Who, did put a slight dent in Part 4's ratings. The third story in the Key to Time saga is full of ups and downs for me. Whilst I think the guest cast are great, particularly Beatrix Lehmann as Professor Rumford, I find this story bogged down by far too many scenes of people just talking. And don't get me wrong, I love a good talker, but in this case I find a lot of it doesn't compel me, and I found myself easily distracted by other things rather than giving my full focus to the screen. The Ogri, or Ogri, the monsters of the piece, are a very interesting idea and concept, but I feel they don't necessarily work the best in their execution. Having said that, despite it not working the best for me, I can completely understand why many people love this one. And for the 100th Doctor Who story, it's far from the worst that could have achieved said milestone. Overall, this story attracted an average of 8 million viewers, a 0.3 drop from the previous story. A small drop for sure, but with this 8 million average, it's arguably one of the most consistent runs for a season so far. 100 stories in and 8 million people still want to see what all the fuss is about? That's not a bad innings if you ask me. The Stones of Blood may not be the most engaging adventure for myself, but there are plenty who see it as one of the best that Season 16 has to offer. To experience it for yourself, you can read the Target book from 1980 or its audio adaptation from 2011. To watch it, you have the VHS release from 1995 or the DVD release from 2007 as part of the Key to Time box set. It has some of the best guest casting and some truly interesting ideas, and from those things alone, I would argue that The Stones of Blood is worth a watch. And besides, if you want the full complete story of the Key to Time, you'll have to give it the time of day to begin with. And with the third segment in hand, the Doctor, Romana and K9 are halfway to completing their most important mission.
Are you from outer space?
No.
Oh.
I'm more from what you'd call inner time.
Ah.
Yes, well, never mind about that now. K9!
The fourth story from Season 16 is the Androids of Tara. In their quest for the Key to Time, the Doctor and Romana arrive on the planet Tara. There they discover that the ruthless Count Grendel intends to usurp the rightful heir to the Terran throne by utilising android duplicates. This story is comprised of 4 episodes, which began airing on the 25th of November 1978 and concluded on the 16th of December. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 4 episodes, and this is much more like it. All episodes saw over 8 million viewers, with Part 4 settling at 9 million and Part 2 going one further, pulling in 10.1 million, the first individual episode of Season 16 to do so. For the Top 40 TV programmes chart, 2 of the story's 4 parts were able to gain a place. Part 2 charted 30th, Part 3 charted 38th, and Parts 1 and 4 just missed out, both finishing at 45th place. So, with numbers on the rise overall, what did the Androids of Tara possess to help bring audiences back to BBC One for the Saturday tea time slot? Well, firstly, airing through the end of November and into December, the darker winter nights always provided some small boost in audience numbers across many programmes, and in Doctor Who's case, we've seen this trend occur in the past few years. Secondly, in the lead up to Part 1's broadcast on the 25th of November, the 15th anniversary of the show was publicised heavily in print and on the telly itself. Tom Baker, Mary Tamm and Caroline Ford appeared on Nationwide, and then Blue Peter, a long-standing supporter of Doctor Who, included a short feature which marked the occasion and showed some clips of archival footage. Celebrating your anniversary always tends to drum up more attention, but a more surprising bout of promotion came in the music pop charts. Session band, Mankind, composed a disco version of the Doctor Who theme, which subsequently peaked at number 25 in the charts and including a performance on primetime music show Top of the Pops. Whilst not directly being commissioned by the production team or the BBC itself, this link to the show arguably gave it some sort of little boost in attention for perhaps the more casual viewer. So with a more active run of promotion, Did the competition over at ITV pose any major threats to the androids of Tara? Well, nearly all regions at this point were airing Bruce Forsyth's Big Night, which had been retooled and cut down significantly from its first few episodes. But despite these changes, Brucey still couldn't bring in the numbers ITV had hoped for, giving Doctor Who a chance to grab some of those disenchanted viewers away. It would have been a good time too, as the androids of Tara is the complete opposite of disenchanting. It's a wonderfully fun story that, despite being set on the alien world of Tara, has a medieval feel about it that will make any fantasy adventure lover happy. All of the cast, leads and guest stars are absolutely on their game here, and whilst overall it's not one of the most iconic of Who stories from the late 70s, it certainly provides an entertaining tale in 4 parts. In fact, it's this story that I often see fans cite as being their overall favourite from the Key to Time season, and when strictly going off fun and adventure, next to the Ribos Operation and the Pirate Planet, I'd be inclined to agree. Definitely give this one a watch if you haven't already. I'm sure you'll be quoting it and remembering key scenes in no time. Overall, this story attracted an average of 9.1 million viewers, a 1.1 million increase from the previous story. It's always nice to see Doctor Who bounce back upwards in the ratings, and to shoot up over 1 million over 4 weeks is a sizable achievement, especially given the overarching story nature of the season and the proposed competition set against it. We also have some repeat data for you. Alongside the Pirate Planet, the Androids of Tara became the second story chosen to get a re-airing in the summer of 1979 in the lead up to the start of Season 17's transmission. Airing over 4 consecutive Thursdays from the 9th to the 30th of August, here are the viewing figures for this repeat, which averaged out at 9.2 million viewers. This is quite a surprising result, as the repeat technically averaged slightly better than the original broadcast and having more episodes average over 10 million. With it being the heart of summer, how did this happen? Well, on Friday the 10th of August, the day after Part 1 re-aired, ITV went off the air completely due to a huge strike that blacked out all but one region of the entire network. This would last until late October of 1979, and with no competition to combat Doctor Who or any BBC programme, audiences had little choice than to tune into the repeat, unless they wanted to check out whatever was on BBC Two. I reckon if the ITV blackout had occurred on the original broadcast in the winter, that the viewing figures would have been even higher than they are here, but as it stands, the strike was a major aid in the success for the programme, and it won't be the last time we see the strike's impact on Doctor Who, but more on that when we get there. The Androids of Tara to some may seem like a generic, run-of-the-mill fantasy tale, but I honestly find it to be one of the most entertaining and fun stories that the late 70s era of the show had to offer. And if you want to bask in the fun this story holds, you can read the Target book from 1980, or its audio adaptation from 2012. To watch it, you have the VHS release from 1995, or the DVD release from 2007 as part of the Key to Time box set. Whether it's the medieval vibes, the continuing quest for the Key to Time, or the superb guest cast that hook you in, I would hope that you'd find something enjoyable to take away from the Androids of Tara. It may not be the peak of the season for me, but it is for many, and as they say, a story that may not be your favourite often can be another fan's absolute must-watch. And as the TARDIS team depart once more, 2/3 of the Key to Time have been assembled, leaving only 2 segments remaining to be found before they fall into the wrong hands.
The Count's just offered me the throne.
That's treason, Count.
Only so long as the king is alive.
Seize him!
The 5th and penultimate story from Season 16 is the Power of Kroll. The quest for the Key to Time brings the Doctor and Romana to a distant moon. They find themselves caught in the conflict between the native Swampies and the crew of a methane refinery. While submerged in the swamps, something stirs. This story is comprised of 4 episodes, which began airing on the 23rd of December 1978 and concluded on the 13th of January 1979. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 4 episodes, and there is a very, very obvious standout here, isn't there? Whilst for the most part the story's viewing figures remain consistent and decent, Part 2 holds the peak of viewership, at a whopping 12.4 million, almost double the weakest showing, which is Part 1's 6.5 million. For the top 40 TV programmes, Part 2 charted 26th, and Part 4 charted 31st. Part 3 just missed out at 51st, whilst Part 1 lagged far behind at 85th. So how on earth did the Power of Kroll manage to pull out a figure that was over 12 million from absolutely nowhere? Well, I would argue it wasn't from the promotional standpoint, though they certainly tried to big up the story and in particular, the main monster. Numerous publications focused on the titular Kroll monster, described by some as being the biggest monster that the show had ever had. Tom Baker was also in the press a little more, as he was fronting a new children's show for Yorkshire Television, entitled The Book Tower, which began as the Power of Kroll was having its broadcast run. Speaking of the other side, let's turn to the competition. Were ITV just showing some really weak programming that helped Part 2 soar over 12 million? Well, it's a little more complicated than that. Between the conclusion of The Androids of Tara and the beginning of The Power of Kroll, Industrial Action had blacked out both BBC channels as well as the ITV network. In fact, it was only the day before Part 1 was due to air, on Friday the 22nd of December, that the production team had direct confirmation that the opening instalment would in fact be transmitted. So, with the three main channels back on air, there was a mad dash to get the important Christmas time slots filled out with some stellar programming, as by the late 70s, TV had become a staple part of seasonal entertainment amongst families. Most ITV regions chose The Incredible Hulk to face down the Time Lord, whilst others opted for shows such as Chips, and in London, for Part 2, a repeat of Emu's Christmas Adventure. Yeah, maybe Londoners looked at this and thought that the funny man with the long scarf might have been the more entertaining option. With London being one of the biggest regions in the ITV network, this could arguably have played a part into how Part 2 of The Power of Kroll was able to gain the viewers that it did. Lastly, we have to take into account the time of year that this aired. Part 2 in particular went out on the 30th of December, and this story actually marked the first time Doctor Who didn't go for a mid-season break around Christmas since season 12. With audiences tuning in their mass millions to catch the festive programming, going out so close to New Year's Day may have potentially helped The Power of Kroll gain its massive viewing figures for Part 2, though I still maintain it was Emu who helped the most there. I'm glad that more viewers did tune into this story, but for me, sadly it falls as one of the lower points of Season 16 as a whole. Whilst the script is written by Robert Holmes, a writer who has contributed some of the most legendary stories in Doctor Who's history, I would argue that this isn't one of his most engaging works. The story itself I think is okay, and it is a shame that many of the guest cast who are all painted green, both back then and now, still get comparisons to the Jolly Green Giant. It's far from the worst examples of Doctor Who, but I do think it's a case where the ambition was perhaps set a bit too high when aligned with what was technically feasible back in 1979. Especially with industrial action happening across the TV industry left, right and centre. Obviously, if you're journeying through the full Key to Time saga, you're going to have to tune in here, but for me, it sadly serves as one of the least satisfying adventures of the season. Overall, this story attracted an average of 9.4 million viewers, a 0.3 increase from the previous story. I think it's no secret to say that the insane figure for Part 2 really did help The Power of Kroll soar over 9 million for its overall average. And I'm not saying the story doesn't deserve it, if anything I'm glad that more people were tuning in as the Key to Time saga progressed, but it makes you wonder how many will stick around for the grand finale. It may be a bit ropey around the edges, it may have tons of shirtless green men running about, and in my opinion one of the weaker scripts of the season, but The Power of Kroll is certainly endearing to some degree and entertaining to many. To find out where you stand on it, you can read the Target book from 1980 or its audio adaptation from 2021. To watch it, you have the VHS release from 1995 or the DVD release from 2007 as part of the Key to Time box set. The Power of Kroll, if anything, shows that Doctor Who doesn't turn away in the face of challenges, and whilst it may not always knock those challenges right out of the park, you can be sure that the cast, crew and everyone involved is giving it the best that they've got. Like many of the stories that get a less than stellar rap, give it another chance, see if anything changes for you on a rewatch. But now we move on to the final adventure of Season 16, where the last segment of the Key to Time awaits. The sixth and final story from Season 16 is the Armageddon Factor. Interplanetary war, betrayal, and the awakening of dark forces await the Doctor and Romana on the planet Atrios, where their mission to find all 6 segments of the Key to Time enters its final phase. This story is comprised of 6 episodes, which began airing on the 20th of January 1979 and concluded on the 24th of February. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 6 episodes, and it's such a shame to see that none of the 6 installments could draw in more than 10 million viewers. Whilst the numbers we do have are far from disastrous, I do think by this point in early 1979, the hyper-popularity of the early Tom Baker years had diminished to some degree. When it comes to the top 40 TV programmes, only Part 6 was able to gain a place, finishing at 36th. The remaining 5 parts all fall below the top 40, with Part 1 falling the furthest behind, as that ended up at 93rd place. So, as the Key to Time saga draws to a close, what support or obstacles did the Armageddon Factor face across its 6-week run? Well, let's start with competition, a factor which has both succeeded and failed in taking sizable audience numbers away from Doctor Who this season. ITV across its network deployed several shows to take on the Time Lord, many of which we have seen previously, including Chips, The Incredible Hulk, and The Bionic Woman. However, on the night of Part 3's broadcast on the 3rd of February, Doctor Who lost 1 million viewers, due to ITV airing programmes made for the previous Christmas season, but had been hit or unaired previously because of the strike action. Though this didn't hit the Armageddon Factor too badly, as most of those million who switched channels came back the following week for Part 4. However, during Part 5's transmission, a technical fault resulted in Doctor Who going off the air for around 25 seconds, to which some music was played. These sorts of technical glitches during an episode's transmission are few and far between, and it serves as a reminder to how fragile some of the playback equipment of the 70s could be. Promotion was in abundance, both for this story specifically and for other reasons too. Part 1 of the Armageddon Factor marked the 500th episode of Doctor Who to be transmitted, a feat that was celebrated in the papers and in a promotional appearance from Tom Baker on popular chat show Pebble Mill. Mary Tamm guested on the same show a few weeks later to discuss her time on the series and her upcoming departure from it. After playing Romana for the entirety of season 16, Tamm had decided against returning for a second series to pursue other acting endeavours. Her departure was extensively covered in the press, and this arguably would have helped once again draw up strong casual interest into how the companion was to be written out. As it did turn out, Romana's departure would be a little bit more complicated than those of previous companions, but more on that when we get there. The Armageddon Factor as a finale, unfortunately for me at least, falls very flat indeed. Whilst it is satisfying to see the Doctor complete the Key to Time and to witness the appearance of Valentine Dial as the Black Guardian, but considering this mainly happens in the last few minutes of the final episode, it hardly saves the rest of it. There are some factors I enjoy though. Barry Jackson, who plays Drax, is the absolute highlight of this story for me. Not only is it great to be introduced to another renegade Time Lord, but the way Jackson plays and portrays him is just brimming with energy and character that you can't help but smile every time he pops up. He also gives us a precious new bit of info regarding the Doctor's name. Well, nickname that is.
His feet, isn't it? Feet of Sigma. Of course it is.
In fact, Jackson's performance was so good that one of the story's writers, Dave Martyn, wrote to producer Graham Williams, offering him a chance to use the Drax character again for free, as he would waive his royalty fees. So even though the Armageddon Factor is one of my least favourite Who season finales, it does have its shining moments that I can enjoy. Overall, this story attracted an average of 8.5 million viewers, a 0.9 drop from the previous story. Losing nearly 1 million viewers during the course of your season finale isn't exactly brilliant, and it actually bucks the trend of the last few years, in which numbers would often pick up for a season's final story. However, having said that, given that this was concluding a story arc set across the past 20 episodes over a few months, it's understandable to assume that perhaps those who tuned in more casually were put off by this finale's interconnectivity with the previous stories. Being a 6-part story could have hindered its chances too, as these longer stories were becoming less and less appetizing to not only audience members, but also the writers, who would often comment that these bulkier tales were too long. But if you want to see whether or not the Armageddon Factor is for you, you can read the Target book from 1980, or its audio adaptation from 2019. To watch it, you have the VHS release from 1995, or the DVD release from 2007, packaged with the other 5 stories titled as the Key to Time box set. The Armageddon Factor is far from being considered as one of the all-time greatest Who stories, but the moments that work really do work beautifully. Drax is one of the most entertaining side characters in all of classic Who, and the conclusion of the Key to Time saga itself is exciting and tense, and even though I and many others wish it could have been realised or handled better, we really have to acknowledge and thank those who were involved in getting the show to the screen, now more than ever given all of the industry strikes that were occurring left, right and centre in the late 70s. You'll be watching it if you're marathoning the Key to Time story arc anyway, and I'd say don't set your hopes too high, but also don't be afraid to shut your brain off and have what fun you can with it.
As from this moment, there's no such thing as free will in the entire universe. There's only my will, because I possess the key to time.
Doctor, are you all right?
Well, of course I'm all right.
So that's season 16, the 6 stories that comprise it, and the ratings that they garnered. With the transmission of episode 6 of the Armageddon Factor, season 16 was brought to an end, concluding a near 6-month run, comprised of 26 episodes across 6 stories. Now, let's have a look at the story averages for this season. We can see that for the most part, the averages were fairly consistent across Season 16's run, the peak coming with the penultimate instalment, The Power of Kroll, which pulled in 9.4 million on average. The least viewed story was The Stones of Blood, which had 8 million households tuning in. Not a disastrous average by any stretch, even by 1970 standards, but it is important to note that this is the first Tom Baker season that didn't have any stories average over 10 million viewers. Again, another sign that perhaps the insane heights the show had reached in those first few years had begun to ebb away. Now, as we always do, let's work out the overall average for this season. By combining the average ratings for each story, we can calculate that the average viewing figures for Season 16 of Doctor Who stands at around roughly 8.6 million viewers. This is a 0.3 drop from the previous season average, and it becomes the least viewed Tom Baker season on average thus far. I have to stress again, for 8.6 million people to be tuning in over the course of 6 months for a show that had just celebrated its 15th birthday is remarkably impressive. A more positive sign that Doctor Who was indeed the national institution that it had become to be branded as by both the newspapers and interviewers on television. It may have taken last place so far when looking at Tom Baker's season averages, but again, to put it in the grander Doctor Who perspective, this is still a higher season average than any of Patrick Troughton's 3 seasons, and also John Pertwee's first 3 seasons too. At this point in our journey, it actually places 7th in terms of the most viewed Doctor Who seasons on average. Season 16 on the whole represents a time when Doctor Who was willing to experiment and try new things. The concept of one overarching story was one which works well for the programme and is an idea that has been used countless times since its revival in 2005. And to respond to criticisms that the show was old and tired in the face of new sci-fi properties like Star Wars, the production team doubled down more than ever to give audiences adventures that felt large in scope, offered some impressive models and effects for the time, and most importantly, stories that would entice the imagination. Did they succeed on all fronts this season? I would argue that they didn't. Some of the later stories, such as The Power of Kroll and the Armageddon Factor, feel a bit flat, and there are moments in the entire season when the budget is clearly being stretched to its limit, but after all of that, Season 16 still delights and entertains millions of fans, both old and new. It's all personal preference at the end of the day, and whilst the Key to Time saga remains one that I don't revisit often, I can appreciate all of the things it did right for so many viewers. And with the segments scattered in time and space once again, the Doctor, Romana and K9 head back into the universe on a randomised course to avoid the Black Guardian to seek out new adventures. But, as mentioned previously, Mary Tamm left Doctor Who at this time, but the character of Romana was to carry on. Who would replace her? How would this come about? You'll have to tune in next time to find out. So those are the ratings details for Season 16. I hope you enjoyed this numerical look back at the Key to Time saga, a season which can often be forgotten, but one that arguably houses some of the finest hidden gems of the 1970s. If you want to enjoy more Doctor Who content, then I highly recommend you check out Joe Brennan. His video essays on the programme are some of the finest on YouTube, so check out his work and subscribe to him for more great content. If you want to read more about Doctor Who and the making of it, I highly recommend the Complete History series of books, which I used as reference for this video. If you want to keep up to date with this series, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and if you want to see new episodes of the series early, then you can by supporting me on Patreon or via my Ko-fi page. Please consider leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, and leaving your thoughts on Season 16 in the comments section below. I've been Adam Martyn from AMTV, and we will see you next time for Season 17.